Hello, Tracy.
Hi, Nino.
How are you?
I'm great.
Okay, we have a crazy story today, to say the least. Tracy, who are you?
My name is Tracy McCurry, and I'm Kevin's mom. I am here today to share my story about what happened with being falsely accused and falsely imprisoned, which I believe led to the death of my son, which they said is suicide.
And not just him, a couple other family members, correct?
Yes, my dad included.
All right, where are you from?
I was born and raised here in Midland, mostly. I love this city, and I'm doing a lot of things here, hoping that Midland can be better.
Where were you born? You were born here in what side of town?
I was born in the South Side.
Let's go. Okay. All right, so your story is pretty interesting, to say the least, like I said. Can you start from the beginning?
I will do my best. This story started in 2004 when my son was actually assaulted by my brother while in my mother and dad's care. And I told them that they could not see Kevin alone anymore without me there. That was not something they liked to do. I was not included in most family get-togethers or dinners or anything like that, but they would want Kevin to come over and enjoy everything with them. While in their care, my mother left my son in the care of my brother, who is an accused offender and has never been charged for those crimes. Numerous victims. So I went to the Midland Crisis Center, myself and my son, trying to get him help. And the next thing I find out, I'm being arrested for this crime.
Okay, and your crime is what?
I was charged with solicitation to commit capital murder, and they changed my charge because I had never approached my sister, never called her, never went to her, never tried to enlist her to kill anyone. So they changed it.
I did hear recordings. Can you start from the beginning? What did this all stem from?
I believe this all stemmed from them trying to take my son. I know my family bypassed the Midland Police Department in turning in this crime. I, at the time, lived in the Ashtonway Apartments, which is off of Neely and Midland Drive. So it's the city of Midland, and yet this went straight to the Midland County Sheriff's Office, Sergeant Weatherby instead.
Why do you think that's kind of weird?
I believe it's strange because on numerous occasions I had already had to involve law enforcement to get my son back from my family members. I had also been almost admitted into the hospital for what they called a suicide attempt by drinking antifreeze. And the Midland Police Department was there, and they made my family leave. I was told to get a restraining order on my mom, my dad, my brother, and my sister and her husband. I did not. Partly because I kept thinking, well, this is Kevin's grandma. I felt guilty. I couldn't believe that my family could do something like that to me.
Okay, so where's the part where it comes in that she's basically, you sent me some audio.
Mm-hmm. So
how did that start, and can you touch on that, please?
Okay, that was the audio. Actually, the recordings was something that my brother was doing in my grandmother's home in hopes to catch his ex-wife or his ex-wife's spouse on recording. And they recorded everyone's conversation coming into my grandmother's home and to my mother's home.
Were you aware of that?
I knew he did it a little bit to try to, possibly record one of them. I had no idea they were doing this on every conversation until they started giving them to me and making me listen to them and watching me cry over the conversations between me and my son's dad.
So were these recorded in the room or over the phone?
Over the phone.
Wow, this is in 2005, right?
It was something that they had put on the phone in 2 different rooms, and then my mother started using one in her home.
Wow. Okay, so what happens? Did you have issues with, so who did they say you tried to get unalived?
The accusation was that I tried to hire my little sister, Christy, to kill a lady named Marie Isabel Sanchez, who was my ex-boyfriend, kind of on and off boyfriend. It was his other girlfriend. Not his wife, but his other girlfriend.
He had a wife.
He did have a wife.
Did you have any children with this man?
I was pregnant twice with him.
And
I lost both of them.
sorry to hear that.
Thank you.
So, what was the first recording, or what did this stem from? Like, where did they first get you on tape? What did you end up saying?
I believe the first tape that they had of me, which they did not put into the trial, was where my sister had asked me about coming and going to my brother-in-law's work. They had just gotten married, and she was in the car. I was in the car. My son was in the car. And we had talked on the way to his work about she was upset. She was freaking out. She was afraid of him, but they were thinking that selling dope would be a good way for them to make money because they couldn't pay their bills. And she had asked me for a gun for that purpose. And I was like, and I didn't know much about gun laws or anything. And so I was like, I think I know a few people have one, you know? So when she called me at this lady's house, Bernice Williams, and asked me about a gun, and I'm still thinking it's for the purpose she had told me in the car the day before. So I had asked him, you know, kind of like nonchalantly, because I'm thinking, this is weird. This is like the strangest. It felt like a game. Like my family was known for like playing pranks on each other, recording, and then like, haha, show you the video later and stuff. And so I was like, this is so weird and bizarre. But I just kind of was like a little bit like playing around with her, like, you know, okay. And so they had a phone call conversation that they taped after the tape that my sister and my brother, or my sister and my dad and my mom had recorded with the sheriff's office. So they had this tape of her saying something about a gun. Then I got back on the phone, and I can't even remember what all the conversation was completely about. But that's the one that they used in order to put a wire on my sister, give her a gun. They gave her a gun.
Who gave her a gun?
The Midland County Sheriff's Office, Sergeant Ray Weatherby. They gave my sister a gun, sent her to my home, and said, tell her whatever it takes to get it out of her, that she wants to do this harm to this lady, so she wants to murder her.
And then how many recordings did they get of you on the phone with your sister?
They only had one on the phone with me and my sister. And it was short, probably like, I think it's like 3 minutes, if that. It's not that long. And part of it, my sister was on hold, so. So
what ended up happening? They ended up, you know, building this case against you, correct? And who else did they get involved besides your sister?
I believe that my older brother was involved, the one that I accused of sexually assaulting my son, because my son had accused him. My brother was facing charges. And so for my brother to get a deal is how I believe this has gone down. My sister is actually asked in the interview with the CID between my mom, my dad, and my sister, was asked, well, who told you to call? And she said, my brother, which she's referring to Larry Vaughn McCurry II. And I guess had produced a card, because that's what the recording, it sounds like she's doing, is handing a card to him. And so the real informant, I believe, was my brother.
And you believe he did this in order to get out of the accusations that you held against him?
I do, and I also believe it's for my parents to cover up the abuse, the sexual assaults, and things that they were hiding that happened to us children at home.
Now, let me ask you, were you kind of wild? Were you on anything back in the day?
When I got with Kevin's dad, his name was Frankie. When I got with him, I didn't know that he was a crack addicted fiend. Like he would always tell me to go out of the room, and he would do something in my kitchen. He would tell me he was doing plumbing, and I believed him. That's how naive I was. I'd never seen drugs or even been around drugs. And I kept smelling these weird smells and stuff, and I would just stay in my room and keep the door shut like I was told. And then one day, he's like, I walked in on him and I was like, that's plumbing? Because he kept telling me it's plumbing stuff. And he had crack on a can and he's like, open your mouth. And I told him, I said, is that drugs? And he's like, yeah. He said, and you're going to do them with me? I was like, I don't want to. And he said, well, then I would get hurt if I didn't. And so I just obeyed because I'd been hurt by him so many times. I didn't want it, but I didn't know I was going to become an addict on one hit.
So you got it. So you
were
addicted.
For a little while before I had Kevin, yes, I was super addicted. And there was a time during my pregnancy, I didn't know I was pregnant for months. And then there was a time when he wanted me to get out with him and I was pregnant. And I was upset. I was freaking out. I actually called the 911 on myself because I was thinking if I end my life, then I can keep me and Kevin out of this torture, of a drug addiction. So they believed I was in that still. And
but you weren't?
No, that was in Virginia. So I didn't even live there with him anymore. So.
Okay, so now up to this point with your sister setting you up with the law enforcement, what ends up happening? When they finally arrested you, right? Or before we go to the arrest, what was all this leading up to? Like, how many recordings did they have? What were they saying? What was the whole situation with the recordings and her setting you up?
I believe that my family members together were doing this because of, like I said, of the charges they were all facing. So behind the scenes, what was the most telling the moment that it happened is my son had been trying to tell me what they were doing. But in his own little 3 and 4-year-old mind and vocabulary, which he had a good vocabulary, I kept thinking maybe he's telling me about something he watched on TV or something he saw. My dad watched a lot of crime shows, and 2020 was his favorite thing in the world. So. And
like, what was he doing?
So he was telling me things about that they're trying to hurt you, and I'm like, but we're not even around them. So, and he said something about. He kept talking about Belle, and I thought, he doesn't even know this woman. Like, where does he get this information? So I believe they were talking about it amongst themselves where he was, and hearing those things. So I think there's 6 recordings total. Only one of them was played in my trial. There's one between the victim and the Midland County Sheriff's Office, and what I found interesting is that the DA that we currently have right now, Laura Nodoff, she's the one that helped get these tapes released to me through the Texas Rangers.
Recently?
In December last year. I've been trying to get them for so long.
And we're going to get into the corruption in the city. I hate to say it, but someone has told me that if the kind of stuff that's going on in the city, if it's pretty dangerous to even know how deep the corruption is. And I'll leave it at that for now. Okay, so the recordings are done. What ends up happening?
I've had to piece this together. As far as I know, what I ended up doing when I got the tapes given to me in the discovery part of the investigation.
Back then, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
In 2005. My attorney had given me these tapes, and he said, well, here's what they have that they can use, in the trial or whatever. He's like, it's not going to be no big deal. It's really, honestly, these tapes tattle on them all by themselves,
Yeah, and I could kind of hear when you sent them to me, but go ahead.
One of them is that my brother, actually, he only taped part of the conversation, or they took that part off. I'm not sure which. When he's irate, just freaking out, throwing a fit on the phone with me. He called me at my aunt's house where I was staying. I was on bond, and I was technically homeless with my son, but I had to have a place to go to where I had bonded out, fell through. It was the Williams home. So when I was with my aunt, my brother had called me, and he was, acting a fool, like, I'm going to throw your stuff away. I'm going to throw all of my things were at my grandmother's house. And he was saying that he was moving in that space now, so he's taking everything to the dumpster. I'm freaking out and crying and upset. He's like, well, hold on. When he gets back on, he's like, oh, sorry, and he starts talking to me again. He starts telling me about the wonderful things his attorney had done for him, got him some deals, helped him, that he'd been running from the law and that this attorney had helped him. So I was thinking, this is awfully twisted. He started talking about how he had taken him, they had gone on camping trips together, had gone out to eat, like hunting and all these things. And I thought it was just kind of odd. He starts mentioning that he was going to handle certain witnesses in my case. And I thought, I don't think that's allowed. I don't think that's legal. And I brought it to the attention of my attorney, and he was like, oh, it's no big deal. It's no worry,
And this was on tape?
Yes. But they had those tapes. They had the tape of my brother saying all these things. It was not introduced into evidence in my trial, as evidence in my trial. There's another one with my mother where she starts talking about, well, if you don't straighten up, this way she said it too, if you don't straighten up, the same thing's going to happen to you that happened to your grandfather. And my grandfather was actually brutally murdered. So that was something that was kind of held over my head as to get your act together or you could have this happen to you.
So in the midst of all that, what did they actually use to convict you?
They used part of the conversation between me and my sister at my apartment, where she had come and she'd already told me she wanted to shoot this girl, and then my brother would go down for what he'd done.
And when she said that, what did you say?
I was like, Christy, I'm like, what in the world? Because I was wondering what in the world had he done that made her so mad at him.
And this was all private conversations. This was all in privacy that she was confiding in you and her, or so you thought, correct?
I believe she was just standing at my house, my little sister, who I had already been through mental health facilities, suicide attempts, where she had tried to kill herself. Like, I'm just thinking, okay, now she's come back again, upset with our brother, which she has lots of reason to be. So I welcomed her in to my home.
And she was talking about murdering
my boyfriend's other girlfriend. We were both side pieces, really.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, and what were you telling her?
Everything that she had mentioned to me in prior conversations, which she does tell the Midland County Sheriff's Office, that she did put a bunch of ideas. I put all these ideas in her head.
I heard that part.
Okay. And so when she says, no, I have the gun and I'm going to shoot her, and I'm thinking, oh, great, like maybe she really has flipped the lid, And I'm thinking, but she can't get to this girl. She's sitting here begging me for gas money. So I kept thinking, if I kind of keep it on that, and then she's like, but what else would you want to do? So what did I do? Said some of the things back to me she had just said to me the day before. And those things were duct taping her in her house and setting it on fire. She mentioned taking her out in the country and shooting her in the head and leaving her for dead, making it look like a suicide, like all kinds of things. I had said those things back to her thinking, I'm going to distract her from the gun and we'll just kind of like hash it out a little bit or whatever. She'll calm down because this is normal for her. This had happened so many times in the past. And so I just thought it was another one of those instances.
Okay, so what ends up happening when they come to arrest you? Can you explain that day?
It was actually very hard. That whole day was because I had tried to call his name was Juan Earl Williams. They called him Tad. I had tried to call Tad and trying to find out if maybe he had heard anything weird because of Belle. He had told me that day he was going to be going back and living with her full time. It's like, I'm just asking you to make a choice. Like, either, this is what I said, either poop or get off the pot. Like, I'm sick of the back and forth. And
were you in love with him?
I did love him.
Do you think he loved you too?
I think in his own way, he loved me too. We lost his sister, and we bonded through that time. We were kind of more booty calls for comfort than anything. It just so happened I ended up pregnant, so.
Even though he had a wife and another side chick?
I didn't even know about the wife for a while.
Wow. And he's from Midland?
I don't know where he's born and raised, but they lived here in Midland.
Okay, so you're
very well-known family, actually.
Okay, so you're speaking to him, right? And all this is like bubbling up, correct? All this talk of taking out the girl, the woman, his, I guess, wife, right?
It was his common-law wife. That's what she testified to be.
Okay.
His common-law wife. And even though he's still married to another lady named Angela Watson Williams.
Wow. Okay, so that day, what happens?
So that day, I had called his mom and I said, "Can I come over?" And she was like, "Yeah." I was like, it's just weird stuff that's happening. She was there. Her best friend, Shirley Kennedy, was there. And Shirley's granddaughter was there. But Kevin was with me. And I kept calling Tad, like trying to find out what's going on. Because I felt like somehow, I don't know, like maybe he knew something. Maybe she had tried to call him. Because my grandma had even told him. And Miss Bernice is on recording, I can't even say it right, on record, saying that my grandma had told her, stay away from Christy, don't listen to Christy because she's crazy.
Because the whole deal was Christy was going to do the dirty work for you, correct?
Supposedly, yes. And so I got with them.
Did they tell him all this? Or are they telling him all this while you're speaking to him and he knows all this? Or he doesn't know any of this?
They actually had already told the victim and him. As far as I understand, they're both interviewed by the Midland County Sheriff's Office. So what I understand is what I've learned through some of that. I didn't get to talk to Tad, but maybe once or twice that day. I didn't call her, even though I called at the house where they lived. He had always told me to call there, so.
Okay, so that day you got arrested, what ended up happening?
My sister had called like 20 times that day, like repeatedly. It was insanity. And finally, the last time, I was like, dude. But I had already given her, backtrack, I had already given her this coat that she wanted to pawn for gas. She said that she turned around and said it was for bullets. So I had it with me. I gave it to her that morning at my apartment. Then when they came, or she kept calling me that night saying, I need to get this coat back to you. I'm like, dude, I don't give a crap about that coat. And it was one that another guy had left at my house, actually, so I didn't care. And she's like, no, it has to be tonight. And I'm like, okay. My mom was like, you're going to have to bring it over here because I'm not going to that part of town. And
what part was that?
The black side is that's the nice way to say how they said it.
What side of town was that?
It's over off of East Chestnut.
In the east side?
Off La Mesa, yes.
Okay, so go ahead.
So when I finally am like, fine, I don't care. Just if you want to come over here, fine, I'll give it to you. You can give it to me. I just don't care. She could have given it back to me that morning, I told her even. And she's like, no, it has to be tonight. And that makes me wonder that if possibly my brother had me and my sister on tape at any other time talking about something, and that was why maybe she was being investigated too. I don't know.
Okay.
I gave her the coat. I came outside and gave her the coat, and in front of her car, I passed it to her, and the lights come on. The officers jump out. There's lights on the street, from other officers, and I'm like, dude, somebody's in a lot of trouble. It was me. That's how stupid I was about this whole thing. I had no idea what she was doing.
And they walk up to you, and what'd they tell you?
He took the coat, and he handcuffed me. They ended up shackling me to the car in the front seat. I've never even seen it happen to anybody, and I was like, my mom, she's carrying my son, and she just looked at me my son's just staring at me like, oh my gosh. Then it all started clicking, all these things he'd been saying to me. I'm like, my baby's been trying to tell me. He was barely 4.
Have you ever been in trouble before?
I had been in trouble before. I had charges out of Odessa for hot checks. I got those dismissed because I proved I didn't do those. I had checks been accused of stealing my sister's checks, and my sister, that's part of what I think the swap she got out of this is those no longer were on her record. That was payment or whatever. So I got charged with theft of my own property, my own VCR, and my own videotapes.
But these were all misdemeanor petty crimes, correct?
I think my parents were trying to get that third time down thing with me.
So whenever they tell you that did they tell you right there you're being arrested for this charge?
No.
What ended up happening that night? They took you away?
They took me to downtown to the sheriff's office and took me into a room, and they told me that they needed my help.
Did they ever tell you about your rights to remain silent, get a lawyer, anything like that?
They told me that I could get an attorney, and I told them who I wanted, and it was actually who ended up being my attorney.
Okay.
But they kept laughing. They said, he's not going to come and help you. And I was like, why? Like, and they said, you can't leave here until you talk to us. And I'm thinking, I don't even know what this is all about. I really didn't. It still was not making sense in my head.
And you were still naive and young.
I was stupid. I was 30. We were very sheltered as children.
And let's be honest, a lot of us don't know
We don't know the law.
Yeah, exactly. Or you can even...
Pardon me.
Yeah, go ahead. Or you can even use your right to remain silent. You know, if you get...
Yes.
Now I know, and now people kind of know, but I digress. So they take you into the room. What happens next?
They told me that I couldn't leave until I talked to them. They told me that I didn't have to say anything to them, but it would be very helpful for me and them if I would. I'm thinking they're investigating my sister, actually, at this point. I had no idea they were, I was being charged with something yet.
They never told you one time before you're put in that room you're being arrested for that charge?
Nope.
Okay. What happened?
No, I was taken, they gave me a piece of paper and they said, can you write out the events of the last 2 days? And I'm like, yeah. They asked me to talk to them on record, and there's actually a part of that recording that's taken out. It's blank space in there, so I don't know if they did it. My attorney did it. Who did it? The DA. Somebody did, because there's a big blank in the tape. When I did fill out all that stuff, anyway, he said, then that's when they read me my rights, and they actually told me, if you have anything to say or if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt us. So I did. I said, well, where's my sister? This is all my sister's doing, so where's she? And I think it might have been the lieutenant, or it's another there was a lady officer in there, and she just kind of laughed like, I can't believe you just interrupted a sergeant or whatever. And I'm like, but he just said, feel free to interrupt us, so.
And what'd they tell you whenever you asked for your sister?
Actually, I don't even remember. I know that that's on the recording, though.
And then when did they tell you? They told you right there you're being arrested for that charge, correct?
They told me you're under arrest for solicitation to commit capital murder.
How did you feel when you heard that statement?
What kind of things started making sense then? Like all these pieces of things that had been happening actually for about a year prior to this. I'm like, now some of this stuff is starting to make sense, They tried to get me for arson already, my family, and I proved I didn't do that. They said I tried to commit suicide by drinking antifreeze. I didn't do that, and I proved that. It was like I was being hunted by my own family.
And you think all this stems from your brother essaying your child?
Yes.
And any others?
And me. I was his victim up until the point out when I was 17 years old.
Okay, let's continue down this path here, if you don't mind. They tell you you're being arrested for that charge. What ends up happening?
I was in shock. I had already taken my medication for the night, which included Ambien, when they came to arrest me.
And that right there, that messes you up if you're awake taking that, correct?
Yes, and at night, my night medication consisted of something for pain because I had a lot of pain when I was sleeping. I have an old horseback injury. And then something for my anxiety, which was Xanax and an Ambien. That was what I took at night. And so it was already fully in my system because I had already planned to go to bed. I was staying the night with the Williams, so to get snatched up out of already the medication starting to take effect into, I believe they came and got me on the 4th, and they didn't arrest me until the 5th. So it was like I was tired. I was hungry. I kept crying about my son. I even asked him if I could see him. And one of the officers even said, I hope you never touch your son again. In fact, I hope you burn in hell. And I was like, I can't believe somebody just said this to me about a kid, and, fast forwarding real quick, that was why I was determined to see my son when he died. They kept telling me I couldn't, and I said, no, I'm gonna. If I have to go through a door somewhere, I'm gonna go find him. And my aunt told him, they said, well, you might want to make a hand available for her because she will go find him. You don't know what she's been through. They've kept him from her for all these years. He died in 2020. So 15 years out, or 2021. So 16 years after we lost each other, October, in October, I lost him that year, 2021. So.
And you believe that's because of why?
I believe it's this case. I believe it's all this fraud, all the lies.
What was his cause of death?
They said it was suicide. One shotgun to the head, one shotgun wound to the head.
And what city was this?
It was in Tom Green County, San Angelo Police Department. Said it was suicide, but I took pictures of the crime scene and showed it to Texas Rangers. They said, no, that's not what happened.
Okay, we'll get to there here momentarily. Sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
So you get charged. I guess you're in jail.
Mm-hmm.
What happens?
I was in jail, and while I was in jail, I was arrested again for the pawning of my own property. So I had pawned some things so that I could make that rent in December, and or get my deposit actually from my apartment that I had gotten. But anyways, Tad was the one that had pawned these things. I had asked him to, but I didn't know that he had taken my grandmother's lawnmower at the same time and pawned it all together. He had been borrowing it to mow his mom's grass. And so I got charged with all that, and that was actually dismissed. While I was in jail, I met a lot of people that I was like, well, there's a lot of people in here that have mental health issues, physical health issues. And it like stuck in my heart. It really did. So when I was able to bond out, I could have bonded out after a week of being there. But my attorney said no, he wanted us to wait it out so that he could try to get my bond reduced from $100,000 down to $10,000. So I agreed to sit in there for 2 more weeks, trusting him and being patient, while what Midland authorities said they were conducting an investigation. But they actually had all the information and really the evidence already. So they didn't need these extra 2 weeks for an investigation.
Why do you think they had you in there then?
Trying to figure out how to make this stick and how to make this work, when after my interview with them and I told them times, dates, I have a really good memory, times and dates and situations and addresses and phone numbers and all these things. And I remember them just even looking at me like, wow, so, I don't know what it says all over the news that they were investigating, but they didn't investigate the other men I told them about that I was seeing. Because the story was that I was so in love with someone that I wanted to kill someone else he was seeing so I could have him to myself. But I had other boyfriends, and I had written their addresses, their names, their phone numbers. They never asked any of them anything.
Did they use the media to push a narrative against you?
I know that they did. They did. It made it look like I was love crazed. It looked like an ethnic triangle. She's Spanish, he's black, and I'm white. And the fact that I have a biracial son, that was something that they kept throwing in there too, is now if you don't take this plea agreement that the conservatives in Midland, Christian conservatives at that, these church people, you're just gonna get buried under a prison. And I'm like, I didn't do it, so no, I'm not taking your plea agreement.
So when did you end up getting bonded out?
I got bonded out in January of 2005, 3 weeks after I was arrested. I'd been out for a short time. I went with Tad to Mexico, actually. He had a job.
You went with the guy that they claimed you were trying to take out his common-law wife.
Yes.
What did he say whenever you spoke to him? Did he say you're crazy? They're crazy? What was his whole opinion on the matter?
He and I were still seeing each other. He and I were still seeing each other. And in fact, I was living with his family until, I know it's strange, until May of 2005.
So you bond out, you go with him on, I guess, a vacation?
We ended up going, he had a job in El Paso, and he had to go we went over into Mexico since we were right there that close, and, kind of looking around. We had flown there and flown to El Paso from here. And then I believe that it was her, the victim, his common law wife, maybe that had alerted the authorities that I had left the United States.
And that was against your bond, correct?
No.
No?
There was no stipulations on my bond.
Okay, and then what happened?
So the person that had bonded me out ended up going off my bond, and someone at the Midland Bail Bondsman, he said, well, I'm going to pick your bond right back up. So just go over there and turn yourself in. I'm going to bond you back out in the morning. And I said, okay. So that's when the other charges for the VCR and the stuff ended up being something that made my bond go ugly or dirty, or I don't know what the terms are. But
It violated your bond?
Kind of like violated the fact that the judge had given me this $10,000 bond. So this person at Midland Bail Bondsman went on my behalf and into my pretrial stuff. I don't know all the works of it, but had actually got it to where he could bond me back out. So
it wasn't Tim Long or nobody, was it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember Tim Long. I don't know if you want to even disclose that, but yeah.
He's very helpful.
Good old Tim Long.
He was very helpful to me.
Okay. All right, so let's continue. You're out on bond. How long does this trial take, and what is your lawyer telling you this whole time? Do you think you're going to prison?
I was actually told I didn't need to show up to my to the
Pre-trial?
No, the big one. Let's see, the grand jury. Sorry.
Who told you that?
My attorney. He said they already have enough evidence to convict you, so you don't have any reason to show up for your grand jury or to indict you. I mean, to indict you and take you to trial. And I was like, maybe if I was there to say something on my behalf, And he didn't want me to talk. He didn't even actually want me to testify in my trial. So.
And let me ask you think your attorney had something to do with the case and you getting sent to prison?
I do believe that his mishandling of the evidence and helping hide the evidence is why I was found guilty.
Do you think there's a nefarious reason why he acted like that, or you think he was just being incompetent?
I believe that his relationship with my brother and their friendship and their connection, whatever it was, my brother was facing charges and he was his attorney too.
Ain't that basically, what's that called?
I think
conflict
it's
of interest.
conflict of interest.
Yeah.
I was told that because the cases are different that it's not, but in the recording that my brother made, he actually states that he was taking my attorney to eat, to hunting, camping.
Yeah, him going camping and hunting, that seems like a pretty serious, not a bromance, but, men that go hunt and camp together, something serious.
Yeah, it was very interesting to me one night. My brother had actually had said, this was before I realized my brother was so deep into this mess that was before the conversation, actually, where I found out about my attorney and my brother. But he said, why don't you come out and go out to eat with me tonight? And I was like...
When did he say this?
I really didn't know he was like one of the instigators.
Your brother?
Yes, until our conversation on the phone. So we hadn't had that conversation on the phone yet. So, and I did. I went with them to the bar downtown. We had dinner and stuff. And
you and who?
Me and my brother and my attorney, our attorney. And so I didn't know he was our attorney yet. So
this was after the whole thing? After the whole,
this was after I was arrested and all that. So, I just kept thinking, man, some things are kind of strange. And I know everybody has said, well, I don't remember this, or maybe you remember it wrong, or are you sure you're not crazy? And I'm thinking, no, I know what I know, and I know what I did, and know what happened in my life. And so I just felt like that was strange.
And let me ask you, but you're saying that you went out to eat with your brother, but didn't you know that he was the one setting you up, or you didn't know it at the time?
I didn't know yet. I hadn't listened to any of the tapes yet.
Okay.
They were given to me by my attorney after they were released to him. And then when I heard these things, and I'm going, this is much bigger than just this little thing between me and my sister and this girl and Tad. This involves all kinds of junk, My brother said he would even ship one of the witnesses out of state if he had to. One of my witnesses. And I was like, you can't do that. And he's like, watch me. And I was like, okay. So I had mentioned it to my attorney, not knowing he was my brother's attorney at the time.
Wow.
So
you end up going to trial. What's your attorney telling you?
I went to trial. They prepped me for trial, him and a guy named Craig. I think his name is Craig Phillips. And they prepped me for this trial, but they didn't have any witnesses for me. I said, you're not going to call anybody on that list that I told you? You know, these guys would at least say, hey, I'm dating her too, you know? And he said no.
And you wanted that to kind of paint the narrative or the picture, that the truth to
Yeah.
you, that you're not like in love with this guy.
Right. Their narrative, and the one that was all over the media, was that I'm so obsessed with this man that I've got to have him, so I have to kill her. And I asked my sister and my brother both in this, I'm like, why did you pick him? You could have picked anyone that I was seeing. In fact, some of the men they had introduced me to, and I think because almost all of them were black, that was part of what made this so heated, because the men that I believed might actually be witnesses for me, they were black. And so inviting them into a trial with all these white folks and stuff, I don't think it would have went well anyway. It probably would have made things really bad. But my attorney kept saying, well, we need to paint you as a good Christian girl, you know, like you're in love with somebody and this just happened to you. And that I'm like, but I'm really a hoe. Like, I was trying to tell them, casual sex and booty calls were common. They're really common now, but I had dates, and I would go on these dates with men, and I would have babysitters for Kevin. You know, I wasn't like out every single night, but I was dating several men, talking to them on the phone, things like that, and my family hated it. They hated the fact that they were black. My dad, even in that recording, says something about, I had a baby by one of them. You know, my parents are very racist. They tried to say that they weren't, but they very much were.
Okay, so interesting. You end up going to trial, and you end up blowing trial, right? You lose.
Yes.
Can you explain what happened that day, and how did you feel? Did you think you were going to get convicted? What was your thought process?
I honestly was a little bit concerned the third day. The last day I saw my son, the last day I held him in the free world, Kevin wouldn't let me go.
How old was he?
He was 4. He was almost 5. All this lasted almost a whole year. So when I was trying to tell them I've got to go, they've already told me that if I'm not there on time, they can issue a warrant for my arrest. And, you know, and I had to be kind of brutal to get him off me because he was just hanging on. I was like, okay, this is something spiritual here. He knows something. And I held him as long as I could, but in order to make him let me go, because he couldn't go in there with me, they had already told me he was banned from the courtroom. He wanted to testify. He begged my attorney to let him talk. And so I spanked him, which broke my heart because that was the last time I physically touched him in the free world. I went into the courtroom and then learned that they were probably going to go ahead and find me guilty that day. My attorney had told me, and then sent me out to a place where I could actually go get something to eat, which is some kind of a deli that's in the Petroleum Club. Took me out to the park, sat down under the park with a baked potato. That was my last free world food. And then they were like, well, okay, they've come back with a verdict. And I go in there, they're like, you're guilty. And I'm sitting there going, what in the world? All this stuff that was hidden that would have made it where I can go free. I felt sick. I feel sick now talking about it.
So you're saying at that point when they convicted you, did you know about all this other evidence? And I guess what I'm trying to figure out here is your lawyer, to me, sounds somewhat incompetent. Maybe he did have, a dog in the fight. I don't know. But you're thinking in your head that there was more that he could have done to help you, correct?
Yes. I had asked him about the way that this was going. And I said, and I even felt like something really ill in my belly. And I said, oh, well, anyway. I said, well, if I'm not paying.
We'll cut that out.
Well, I had asked my attorney that if I wasn't able to pay him, even though he told the judge I was paying him, I said, if I'm not paying you and you're not court appointed, how are you making any money out of this? He said, oh, don't worry. He said, I've already been paid. I was like, but the trial's not even over. So I was confused.
So you never paid him for services?
No, I couldn't afford it.
That's very odd.
I couldn't afford his services. He knew that I couldn't afford his services. He told the judge that even if she can't pay for it, I'll still represent her. And this was in my bond hearing. Because she even asked, she's like, a single woman, pregnant, no home, like, how is she going to pay your bill, you know? And he acted like he wasn't worried about it.
Okay.
So he was not concerned. I thought, who's paying you then? You know? This is when I started learning about throwing cases for a purpose, you know, and I thought, well, I wonder if he's doing that for me, you know, like throwing my case.
What do you mean by throwing cases on purpose? What's that phrase?
Like not winning a case on purpose for whatever there might be incentive to do so. So I think proving me innocent would have put him in an uncomfortable situation with the person back to square one. I was going to be pressing charges on my brother. They wouldn't take it. Nobody would take the charges. They still won't. So.
Okay, so you get convicted. Do they lock you up right there?
Yes, I was taken into custody. I had stayed up the whole night before with my son, and I had held him and rocked him and cried with him and everything. And I told him, I said, just in case I don't come home, because this was the end of the trial, I said, just in case I don't come home tomorrow, I want you to know I love you. You know, I gave up everything to be Kevin's mom, and then to have it all robbed away from me, I felt so betrayed. I felt betrayed not only by my family, not only by my perpetrator, but also by the system. I felt like I had been completely betrayed by the Midland County Sheriff's Office, by the District Attorney's Office, and the media. The media had not helped me at all.
Did they paint you a certain way?
I believe they painted me like a home wrecker, you know? I wasn't wrecking that home. It was already a disaster, you know? What really happened is my home was wrecked. Me and Kevin, I had finally gotten away from my family, got us a cute little apartment. We were on our own. My family was not welcome over. So for my sister to be there and me to allow her in was because I was worried about her. My brother, I didn't want him to know where I lived. My parents, I didn't want them there. I had told them they're not welcome. So my whole entire home that was wrecked, Kevin's home was wrecked. Then he went bouncing around. My parents sued me for custody. I had already left arrangements for him to stay with my aunt and my uncle. They were going to make sure Kevin and I kept a relationship because they knew through prison ministry that was super important for the kids. Well, my mom sued me. My grandma said if I didn't give Kevin willingly to my mother, that she was going to disown me. I said, well, bye. I'm not doing that. I can't just hand him to them. I was sued for custody. That hearing, 2 hearings actually, I was able to represent myself.
This is while you're in prison?
Mm-hmm. My son had an attorney, which was actually appointed to him actually through a conversation after I was sexually assaulted in the Midland County Detention Center.
This is before you went to prison while you were waiting to catch chain, correct?
While I was waiting to catch chain, yes.
You want to touch on that real quick? What happened?
In February of 2006, I was sexually assaulted by an inmate, a female inmate.
In general population, basically?
Mm-hmm.
What happened?
F-tank. The details are still in a case right now, so I can't really discuss too much about them, but I had contacted there was an investigation in the jail, an internal affairs investigation, and then nothing happened. And I thought, nobody care? Does nobody care that this happens in here? And so I wrote to the district attorney's office and I said, maybe you might want to know this is happening over here. And that week I got taken to the Midland County courthouse. Al Shorey sat in a room with me he said, we can't talk about your case because we were in the appeal process together. And in other words, we're like opposing team right now. He said, but I want to help you with what's going on. He said, I can't do anything for you, but is there anything else maybe that you can think of? And I said, I kind of flippantly said it like, yeah, well, my son needs an attorney, somebody to protect him because my parents are suing me for him, and he's going to go right into the hands of a predator. Predators, really. And I was thinking, and I just kind of had flippantly said it. I didn't think they really could. And he said, done. Teresa Klingman's sitting there, and he had told her to go and get the name of an attorney. The attorney she brought back, his name was Brent Morgan, and he was my son's attorney.
And did he help? Was he against you?
He wasn't against me. He was just making sure that Kevin had a home and that he would have food and clothes.
So what ended up happening to Kevin in that case?
Kevin was taken from my aunt and my uncle and placed with my parents.
So he lost the lawyer.
I don't know how it all works in that. I was representing myself and my rights and really kind of standing in for his dad because his dad had written a letter saying, please give the McCurrys Kevin. I'd rather him be with them than with me, or with anybody he didn't know. He didn't even know my parents, so.
But you ended up losing him to who you didn't want him to go to, correct?
Exactly. Who we were running from, the reason we got the apartment in the first place.
Okay, so you're in prison. How long did you do in prison, and what prisons did you serve your time?
I pulled chain in June, right after the second custody hearing. I pulled chain and I went to Woodman. I got there and they asked, one of the first questions that they ask you is, have you ever been sexually assaulted while you're incarcerated? And I was like, yes. The lady was really rude and she's like, I don't think you understand what I mean. And I was like, those are pretty plain words. So I said, well, yes, my answer is yes. And she got ugly. And another inmate was like, she heard you the first time. She's saying yes. Like, the lady's just sitting there. She goes, I'm going to have to get the PREA sergeant. And I'm like, I don't even know what that is, Anyway, it's the Prison Elimination Act sergeant, Safe Prisons. She came and got me, took me to a room, and lieutenants, wardens, and everybody were in there. They want to know how this happened to me. The person that's in the file is actually on their unit right then. She had pulled chain 2 weeks before me. And so they wanted to know, how come there was no paperwork in her paperwork? It's all in my file, is what they told me. They said, everything we needed to know about her, we know it now because it's in your file. And I was like, still didn't understand what it all meant. So I was at Woodman. I was getting death threats that same day from her that passed through to me.
How they passing messages to you?
SSIs, which are they're officers, clerks, really. Like they do what they clean, they go run errands or whatever. They're kind of like.
But they're inmates.
Gophers.
Are they inmates?
Mm-hmm.
So basically, like they're working a job, and they're sending.
That's their job. Yes.
And what city is this in?
That was in Gatesville.
Okay.
Woodman's in Gatesville, and then but I was still in the care of the officers. I hadn't completely done my intake yet.
And how did you feel?
I'm like, dude, she's here.
But I'm saying, to take it all in, right? You get sentenced to how many years in prison?
I got a 15-year sentence and a $10,000 fine.
Okay, so you're in a new prison. You caught chain. You're nervous, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, yeah.
From what I know about prison. And you're
Terrified.
The first place that you land, your predator, the wicked woman, is there. How did you feel about all this? I mean, what were your emotions, with this whole situation?
I was afraid because when we were in the county, she said that if I told anyone that she would have, it would be something that would happen to Kevin, my mom, and my dad, because she had the address where Kevin was. So I was really worried that something would. So I had been quiet for almost a month, a little over a month. And so then I get here with her, and I'm sitting there telling the people, yes, I've been sexually assaulted. But then I find out she's there, and I was freaking out. I get in there, and eventually, after a couple of hours, one of the sergeants comes, the PREA sergeant, and she said, I'm glad you showed up when you did. We've been having complaints about this inmate, about her inappropriate with our inmates that are here. We just thought it was like, just people talking. And I said, well, there was more victims than me in my county. So she said, I'm going to tell you how good God is. and how much he's watching over you. What's in this paperwork puts you on camera till you're gone. So where they were going to put me in the dorm, I would be on camera, but she would have been bunk 24 and I was 26. I was just praising God that these people listen to me, because in prison, a lot of times you don't matter. You're a number. Sometimes you get called your name, but most of the time it's just your last name. And they said, well, we've actually put her in administrative seg and she's going to be shipped off the unit this week. So I was like, oh God, thank you. Like,
amen. So how long did you do there?
I was there for, I think it was almost 4 months. When I was there, they said I had cancer, and so I needed surgery. That's a whole other story in itself, but so they had to keep me a little bit longer, try to work out a game plan, I guess. Then I found out the same day that my cousin had committed suicide. He's on that list of witnesses that I had given to the Midland County Sheriff's Office. So I started in my gut thinking, this is getting good. This is going to grow. The more people don't know, it's going to grow and get uglier.
So some weird things are happening, right? People start unaliving themselves. Your cousin was the first one supposedly doing this to himself, correct? Okay, so we'll get to the prison on another video. So you end up serving your time. What was happening? Like, how hard was it? And were you learning about your case as you're in prison?
When I was there, I really didn't have anyone to write to except for this lady here in town, an older lady who had actually written to my pastor telling her I needed to be seen because I had just raped in the county. She was my ride or die through the whole entire time up until this year she passed away. If I needed help with legal work, she was trying. If she could make copies for me, she was trying. I was sending coded letters to her. I knew what they would mean, but somebody to read them, if mailroom read them, or even if she read them, she wouldn't know what it meant. Even she told me, Tracy, nothing you wrote me made any sense, but I saved them. She was like, here's all your letters. I was like, thank goodness you kept them. You kept your promise to keep them all.
Why did you do that?
Partly because of what I feel like is corruption. I started seeing it in the jail where mail would just go missing, or I would see an inmate with another inmate's mail because a dirty officer would be acting dirty. And I thought, I don't want the full gist of anything being in anyone's hands because it could get me hurt, you know? Prison is not a game. It's not somewhere to play. It's like a psychological battlefield.
And even in a woman's prison.
Oh, it's horrible.
I've heard.
All the officers that I was there with, they said women's prisons are much more crazy because it's a psychological
They're playing games, mind games, yeah.
Bullying, and the officers get involved with it.
Okay, so Tracy, to not cut you off, but for time's sake, you serve how many years in prison and what happens?
I served from October of 2005 until April of 2014. My best friend hired an attorney who got me out of prison early. She was a parole attorney, and I'd been told by a parole counselor, until you get this mess in here fixed, which it looks like what they probably had in the media, until you get this fixed, you'll never make parole. You'll do your whole 15. So she rewrote it, took it to the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles. 2 weeks later, I was kicked out.
Rewrote what?
It's called a case summary. And she pleaded on my behalf, saying this is what really happened to her.
So you didn't confess to anything?
I never confessed because I didn't do it. I feel like through manipulation and evasion of different conversations, just pieces were just like put together, you know?
I'm not going to lie. That kind of sounds like a messed up deal that they did that to you because, I mean, give me the hardcore evidence, you know. It kind of sounds like they set you up, even the police, but we'll get to that in a minute. So you end up getting out, and what's your mindset when you get fresh out of prison?
I'm trying so hard to get back here to Midland to get to Kevin. When I was kicked out of prison, it was only 2 weeks that I had knowledge. I learned on one brother's birthday that I was getting out of prison. I learned, and then on the other brother's birthday 2 weeks later, I said, okay, God's all over this one to be like this with the numbers. And so it ended up being his birthday when I got out. They dumped me off in Austin at Austin Transition Center. And in the Austin Transition Center, it's full of K2, drugs, alcohol, sexual assaults, and all kinds of things there. And I was just freaking out. Like, I can't believe I've left a horrible situation and terrible situation with just females, and now here I am with men and women at this facility. And I was freaking out. All I kept saying was, just, I'm trying to get back here to Kevin. I want to be his mom again.
So that was like a halfway house or what?
It's a transition center. Because I'd been locked up so long, they felt like this was a good place for me to go to this private facility so that I could get reacclimated to living in the free world.
But it was full of corruption, filled drugs.
It's just disgusting.
And real quick, were you on paper? Were you on parole?
I was on parole. That type of paperwork until October 8th of 2020. And then when I got off of that, I was trying even harder, because in between there's more stories in there of why I wasn't able to reconnect with Kevin. Mostly because of law enforcement and my parents, my sister, threats, death threats, all these things.
So it was a big old fiasco.
And I was also kind of caught up in some human trafficking. That's a long story too. Boarding homes are not always what they appear to be.
We'll touch on that in another video.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So in October of 2020, I'm just gung-ho of, I just got to find him now. I know he had been passed around to different places, different homes here in Midland. He had lived in various locations. So I was just trying to find him. Where is he? I want to reconnect with him.
Were you ever speaking to him or being in correspondence with him?
We had a video chat and then one phone conversation. The video chat, he taught me actually how to FaceTime. He's like, let's FaceTime, Mom. I'm like, I don't even know what that is. So we did have that. We exchanged some pictures that way, some text messages.
But I'm saying during your time in prison, did you write him?
I was writing to him. In fact, one day in November of 2009, they say, McCurry, you have a visit. And I'm like, I never have visits. It's probably wrong. Like, I was just kind of like, oh, well, I was waiting for him to call it again. McCurry, are you going to get ready or not? And I'm like, I don't get ready because I just think it's a mistake. I kind of brushed my hair and just went as I was. And I walk in and my mom, my dad, and my son are there. And I was like, why now? Like, I see my kid. He's almost as big as I am. He's got shoes bigger than mine. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. I'm looking at my parents. I'm looking at my mom. She's like sick to be there. And my dad looking all kinds of ways. And we all sit down after some hugs. And Kevin just wants to latch on. He tried sitting in my lap because I'm his mom, and because of his size, the lieutenant was like, sit in the chair. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, wow. So my dad, in front of the lieutenant, says, do you know why we're here? And I was like, no, why? He said, because my best friend, him sitting over there pointing at my son, he said he's going to shoot me and your mom in our sleep if we don't bring him. And I was like, oh my gosh. I said, are y'all getting him the therapy that's court ordered? And my mom was just like, yeah, right, whatever. And I asked my dad, I said, is he getting any kind of mental health help? And my dad, that's psychology. And I'm like, dude, if he's threatening to kill y'all in y'all sleep, you might want to help him out and get him some help. So that's the only time I touched him while we were separated through the incarceration.
Okay, so you get out and do you find him?
I found him to be at my parents' house. My grandmother was living with him at that time. I called and was able to chit-chat for a second. And then Kevin called me and he told me, because I was trying to tell him I wanted to get back with him, that Family Promise here in Midland said we could get a place together here through Family Promise, but I'd have to have him back in my care. My church at the time was trying to be a liaison with us to help. And my mom told him I was just trying to use him for money. And so he didn't want to reconnect with me. In fact, him and my grandma both got on the phone. They said, we're probably recorded right now, but don't call here because it's getting us hurt. And I was like, so I didn't talk to him again. And
how old was he?
13. And I wasn't able to talk to him again. In fact, we didn't actually talk again. We just text messaged back and forth when we reconnected after I got off parole. I'm still bound to the city of Midland through a $10,000 fine. It's now $14,500. I can't get a job. They don't even give me my driver's license. I've been trying to do that. The state says that I owe them that money before I can get my driver's license. A lot of jobs I need my driver's license, and trying to get a job with this background is impossible.
Okay, so let's get to the people that are no longer here. Mm-hmm. What's happening with that? Can you give us a rundown? It's pretty interesting. Go ahead.
My dad was found hung in his home in his family's home where he grew up, April 28th of 2016. My sister told her she had to die in November of 2019. This was devastating to Kevin. He told me that. He was very upset about the fact that she was gone and that he was willing to take care of her, but my sister wouldn't let him. He told me that my sister had made him leave. And he said that at that time he and his fiance lived in his truck instead of getting to take care of his granny. She was bedridden. My mother had a rare disease called diabetes insipidus, and it affects your mental health. I was trying to tell the authorities when all this was happening back in the day, look, my mom's sick, and she's like created a sick person in my sister and in my brother. I was like, please don't do this to me. I was like, even go look at her medical records, look at my sister's psychiatric hospitalizations, institutionalization, and so I think that what happened with my mom, dying in hospice it really is because nobody was going to help her get well. Then my son, I got the news the 4th of October. That day, my sister had called me and asked me if I was sitting down.
Where were you?
I was at home.
In what city?
In Killeen. That's where my home is, in Killeen. And right now anyway, I work and have a studio here, but I'm an artist and self-employed, so my sister had told me, that he was found shot in his home, and I'm like, this is 3 people now that this woman threatened me with when she raped me. They're all dead. Like, what really has happened to all 3 of them is what I was trying to find out. Like, so I came back to Midland. I was terrified of law enforcement. Anywhere I was just terrified. And I was like, God said, you've got to step out of this, really. Like, so I did. I came back here and I went and introduced myself to Sheriff Kreiner, and was welcomed well, which I'm greatly appreciative to him. He encouraged me to keep fighting for my freedom. He said I'm one of many cases, and after doing my research, I'm one of hundreds of cases like me that are tainted through, I think, misinformation, hiding evidence, not introducing evidence. And I do believe there's a buddy system between the prosecutors and the defense attorneys in this town.
Do you feel like Midland law enforcement failed you?
I believe that the Midland County Sheriff's Office failed me.
Now, I see you have a Texas Rangers hat. You said that you wore that on purpose. What's the purpose of that hat?
One of my good friends killed himself in 2022. We grew up together. His sister is like my best friend in the whole world. And this is his hat. I'm not against law enforcement. I just think that dirty ones or ones that have made mistakes need to have it available so that they can say, hey, wait, I've made a mistake, or hey, now we have evidence that would probably, we just need to call off this whole case, introduce to the media, hey, we did this, we didn't know this at the time, but I'm advocating for that because it's taking lives.
And that's what I was going to ask you. What is your mission now with your freedom? You have a podcast?
I do have a podcast called Pink Bee. I have a TikTok, Pink Bee Artist.
What does Pink Bee stand for?
Well, first off, this right here, suicide prevention, this is what and awareness, advocacy is my mission in life right now. I think God just gave me this vehicle and now I'm just riding. But Pink Bee Artist, I am an artist and I believe I'm a mental health coach. I'm board certified through the American Association of Christian Counselors. I advocate for human trafficking and for recovery, reentry, and suicide. So Pink Bee is a way that I can flip a script that was and a narrative that was really handed to me in jail and prison. When I first was locked up, I was called a pink bitch often, and I thought, I'm kind of like peachy. Like, how about peach one? But
maybe you have a pink aura.
I
right?
like something, and pink is my favorite color. So I always thought it was really funny.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'll take that. Like whatever. It didn't hurt my feelings. Like it was mostly black women that called me this, black officers actually. So I really was like, oh, well. So after Kevin died, I started a little business called Coffee with Kevin. A lot of people know that all over Texas. But now Pink Bee this is me. I've done my healing. I've done the grunt work of moving beyond the greatest loss of my life. And now this is me, like rising from the ashes, really, in a way.
What would you say is the biggest takeaway from this whole thing that you learned?
I'm not alone. There's so many people, so many families. The Texas Innocence Network is huge, but the American Innocence Network is even bigger. America is the #1 top incarcerated country in the world. We are the incarcerated capital of the world. That should alarm Americans. Technical violations or technicalities and all this. There is such, and I'll advocate for them in this moment, there is such a need for law enforcement. There's such a need for good, honest law enforcement. There's such a good need for good right attorneys, defense, and prosecution that are not just out there for money. That it's not just about money. It's about lives. It's about families. My family was ripped wide open, and numerous suicides, which I don't believe are suicides, have come out of this case.
What is your end goal with your case?
My end goal is my exoneration. I believe that I deserve that. I have fought almost 20 years. In January, it'll be 20 years that I've been fighting for this. And if the Midland County Sheriff's Office had just listened to me and paid attention to what I was saying back then, we wouldn't be without family members today. My family's scattered all across the United States. I advocate for children of prisoners. They matter. They matter so much. A lot of people in reentry and recovery, though, a lot of the biggest reason that they're even struggling is because they have someone in their family that is either incarcerated, been incarcerated, or themselves. So I advocate for people that don't have voices. After escaping human trafficking, with the help of the Austin Police Department and the Travis County Sheriff's Office and that district attorney's office, victim services there, I feel like I was finally heard and given a voice, and I've been advocating ever since. So human trafficking we're like #2 in the nation, or in the state, and that's high in the nation. So, and most everyone that I talk to here in it says authorities know. I know what's going on. So,
Well, Tracy, I thank you for telling your story. We're going to hopefully get some more content here momentarily. We're already at the time limit here. I would just say thank you for sharing what you shared. Final message for anybody watching right now. Go ahead.
My message is going to be for women like I was, dumb, naive, believing that the good guys or the government is there to help you. I believe that they were. They didn't listen. if someone has a stake in the game, it could be that your voice doesn't matter and you shut down, but don't. Even if you're afraid, stand, because your voice is the only one that can tell your story. Don't expect someone else to tell your story for you. So.
Well, thank you, Tracy. Anywhere they can reach you, your socials.
All of my socials. I'm on TikTok. I'm on all of them. And if you just look up #PinkBT, you'll find me.
All right, Tracy, thank you for your time, and God bless you.
Thank you.